My mom's new boyfriend had just recently moved in with us. They'd only been together for about 10 months, but things seemed to be working out for them. Before that, it was just her and I for about the past 5 years or so. I was uncomfortable with the change, but wanted her to be happy, so I stayed optimistic about the whole thing. I even put in my fair share of involvement by helping unload moving boxes into the house. Granted, I couldn't keep myself from nosing around in the things piled up at the top of each box as I carried them inside. There wasn't really much worth paying attention to, though. Things he owned seemed very bland, with nothing more exciting than maybe a few glass paperweights with scorpions frozen inside. He was alright. Even after everything he owned was stacked in my living room, he still felt like nothing more than a guest. But I figured it would take some time to get used to the idea of having someone else around the house. Several months would pass by with things at home feeling surprisingly normal. Mom traveled for work a lot, often leaving for days at a time, while her boyfriend would work from the office he put together in our spare bedroom. I would rarely see either one of them, as he generally stayed pretty consistently in the office, only ever walking by for the occasional trip to the bathroom or the kitchen for a bite, to which he would always make a point of stopping and saying a quick hello. I really enjoyed my alone time, but to be honest, I didn't mind the company. On top of being an easygoing roommate, he was always pretty polite. Plus, the second income really took some of the weight off my mom's shoulders, which was, of course, welcomed. But like all good things, pleasantries eventually ran out. It all started the day he approached me with a book that he went out of his way to explain to me was a diary he had found in one of the last boxes he had left to unpack. He said it was about half filled in from his childhood and that he'd forgotten he still had it. He was clearly excited, holding a big grin on his face while describing a few of the entries he'd been thumbing through. He told me things his younger self had written, such as kissing his girlfriend in the 4th grade, meeting his first dog, time he'd spent building a bike ramp that he immediately fell off of, and the day he finally stood up to his bully and left a hero with a black eye. He was rambling. He trailed off as he randomly flipped through the pages, digging deeper into the book. "Thought it'd be fun if I started writing it again," he said in an excitable tone. "You know, like pick back up from where I left off. Maybe even finish the book." He was thinking out loud, still thumbing through the pages. He spoke so passionately about difficult times that the diary had helped him get through, thankfully sparing me any of the potentially tragic details it had apparently helped distract from. This was a side of him I hadn't seen, which gave me a new perspective on his worthiness for my mom. However, I couldn't help but feel like something was off, almost as if it had been rehearsed. But I didn't think much of it, just smiled back at him awkwardly until the silence convinced him to walk back to his office, with a wide grin still spanning across his face. Over the next few days, I noticed a slight change in his routine. I couldn't recall seeing him walk by on any bathroom breaks or trips to the kitchen. Not that I was paying much attention, it just seemed odd. It wasn't until I started listening for him to walk by that I heard his door creak open, followed by slow, drawn-out steps over the settling floorboards in the hallway. I reached for the remote and quietly lowered the volume of the TV show I was watching until it was almost muted, then stared off into the corner as I listened closely. That's when I saw him walk out from the hall, towards the bathroom, staggering at a shuffled pace, barely lifting his legs as he dragged his feet forward. He didn't turn to greet me as he usually would, but I could still see his face. He looked terrible. I could see that he hadn't slept much by the gray bags under his eyes, and his skin looked dry, with greasy, disheveled hair that looked like he hadn't showered recently either. It was unsettling. He seemed very disconnected as he passed by into the threshold of the bathroom, as if I wasn't even there. I felt so uneasy that I just let myself sink into the couch, motionless for the few minutes it took him to walk out of the bathroom, shuffle past me again and back into his office. It wasn't until the door clicked shut that I could feel myself breathing again. A few moments passed before I shook off the bad energy I felt and turned the TV back up. But I only watched for a minute or so before my mind caught up with me and started to wonder, what's going on that's keeping him from sleep? I couldn't imagine his work being all that stressful. All he does is write articles on current events for newspapers and magazines. Pretty basic stuff. For whatever reason, I tried to remember when I last saw him. I sat there, deep in thought as the TV carried on into the next program. I ignored it as I kept delving further and further back into my recollections of this week. Once I really got to thinking, I was quite surprised by how long it had actually been since I'd last seen him leave that office, or at least the last time he left his office looking well rested. My thoughts just kept going back to the day he showed me that old diary, remembering how happy it made him act. I wasn't sure if that was our last shared moment before today, but I felt that the extreme contrast was worth noting. I thought to myself, How does someone go from recovering a cherished childhood item that brought them so much obvious joy to a sudden hermit lifelessly droning around the house? I couldn't piece it together. All that came to mind was that diary, so I decided I would need to see it for myself, hoping it would answer some of my concerns, or better yet, dismiss them. I left the TV on and began a slow walk down the hall and towards the office. As I drew closer, softening my feet more with every step, it felt more real. I silently closed in on the door, my eyes fixed on the light leaking from underneath as the short hairs on my arm raised up. I had to consciously focus on breathing as I could feel myself holding the air in my lungs again. Standing heel to toe as I find myself at the edge of the door. Again, I'm holding my breath. I don't hear anything. I inch in for a closer ear as the distant TV tunes out of focus. My foot creaks as I release weight down onto my leg. I lean in closer. I think I can hear something. The handle spins and the door steadily swings open. I tilt my head up in sudden shaking fear and lock my eyes with none other than my mom's boyfriend. He looked worse up close. I could make out beard stubble growing in, paired with a terrible BO smell. His eyes looked irritated, which at first I thought were fixed right on me, but it looked more like he was looking through me, as if he didn't acknowledge me standing right in front of him. Neither of us made a sound. The next thing I heard was his hand letting go of the door handle and falling at his side. I back out of the way as he shuffles forward, still not saying anything. He walks slowly down the hall and into the bathroom. The door shuts. I start to breathe again. I rub my arms to settle the goosebumps and sidestep into the office. It looks like hell in here. The desk and floor are coated in papers and magazines. I can't avoid stepping on them as I briskly walk towards the front of the desk and see it. The old diary. I know I only have a few more seconds before he comes back, so I don't waste any time. I pull the book open and skim through the first pages, reading as fast as I can. I don't know what I expected though. It's all pretty standard stuff. I read through a couple pages on summer camp, the girlfriend from 4th grade, and practically a whole chapter on the bike ramp. I start feeling kind of ridiculous as my eyes scan from left to right in a continuous page flip. And then something catches my eye. A word that doesn't look right. I'm flipping so quickly that I have to backtrack to it. There it is. I read out loud. I've reached the part about the bully he described, only he doesn't tell the same story. It detailed a brief grade school fight, ending with a black eye, but then the writing goes on about how he follows the bully home and waited around the bushes in his front yard until late at night. The rest is so grim I try to pass it over without exactly reading it. My heart drops as the goosebumps in my arms return like needles erupting out of my skin. Each entry that follows only gets darker, revealing a boy's introduction to violence and torture. I even recognize one of the stories as a close reflection of a disappearance from the news when I was younger. I assumed it was the same. As I reach the end of the childhood chapters, I see a change in tone. Now reading the recent stories, the pages feel heavy with my thumb scratching over the indent made by the pen pushed too hard as he writes. It's not enough to distract me. I can't believe what I'm seeing. Page after page of an in-depth plot against my mom and I, with every minor detail explained, all the way up to an alibi and a burial, which pains me to realize I'm apparently standing directly over. The words become near impossible to read, but I can't bring myself to turn away. I get halfway through his grisly plan before I hear the bathroom door opening. I slam the book shut and propel myself out of the room and into the hall, then dart for the front door before he even steps foot out of the bathroom. I read enough of that diary. I just have to see it for myself. I need to be sure. I jump down the front porch steps and run to the side of the house, looking back before I lose sight of the doorway. It stayed closed behind me. I kneel down and tear off one of the side panels to the house, exposing the crawl space underneath. I don't hesitate to charge into the darkness, squinting my way through cobwebs and dust. I crawl towards the belly of the house, shaking up the cold dirt from under me. I pay attention to the floorboards above me. I make sure I'm under the office. Then, just as it was written, there it was. A deep well of empty space, dug lower than my arms could reach. It wasn't fantasy. Clearly something inside that diary reminded him of something dark. Something that pulled an evil out of him that, up until today, I would have sworn was impossible. I lay there in a daze until I heard stomping, spray dust from right above my head and snapped me back in reality. I turned around and doubled back out from under the house. I could see the front door start to open as I flew down the street to a neighbor's house, where I took refuge and called the police. There was no sign of him as I ducked out in their living room and waited to hear the sirens. I hear the sirens. By the time they arrived, he was gone. along with his diary. We've heard no trace of him ever since, and thank God. I think that for now, my mom and I are okay with maybe it being just the two of us.